All right, there we go. Awesome. So welcome to the foam rolling webinar. So yeah, like I was mentioning earlier, we will discuss what foam rolling is, what the benefits are, and how it's a good partner to an active stretching routine. And then kind of go through a little bit of a technique session on just how to use the foam roller, where it's best to use the foam roller, and then how there's other types of equipment or tools out there that assist with that self-myofascial release. So it's sometimes called SMR for short. And basically that's what foam rolling is. It's a type of myofascial release. And fascia is, we have lots of networks of fascia in the body. If you ever look at, in personal training and health coach and group fitness, we see a lot of like anatomy diagrams, and in the diagram sometimes you'll see the bones, you'll see muscle, and then you'll kind of see these other white areas that are where muscle kind of goes under or feeds into, and some of those are part of the fascia networks of the body. So like one area in particular is around the low back. There's a lot of thick fascia there, and so when fascia gets tight, starts to lose that elasticity, that's where a tool like foam rolling can help. And so there's lots of different types of foam rollers out there. Many of them are readily available in gyms, or you can, if you have one at home, always a great tool to use at home as well. I've got a couple of things that I use. This is one of them. This is one of them. And this is one of them. And I'll show you during today's discussion kind of what each one does, because they, the degree of, you know, like the grooves or patterns that a foam roller might have, whether it's softer or harder, all plays a difference into kind of how the release will go. And also go through the importance of breathing when foam rolling too. That is a really important thing to always be doing when you foam roll. It's something to breath and stretch and release all go hand in hand. And so really important, because that helps ease when you're doing foam rolling, because sometimes it can feel a little uncomfortable at times, especially if you're feeling really tight. And when it becomes a more regular practice foam rolling, it that uncomfortableness of the technique can reduce a little bit when it becomes a more regular sustained habit. And so yeah, that is the overview of what we'll do today. And the benefits of foam rolling, they include, you know, helping release some of that tension, bring some of that elasticity back into the fascial networks, but it can help with just promoting that blood flow around the muscles, around that part of the body. But it also is really beneficial for improved range of motion. So we do a lot of like dynamic stretching in a warm up. We might do static stretching in a cool down, but when you combine that with a little bit of foam rolling, it can really help with full range of motion. And you'll see that for, particularly for weightlifters. I know if I'll do a little bit of foam rolling in a warm up, just a little bit, it can really help ensure that range of motion is there. Sometimes that's what happens when there's tightness in the body, is it restricts the range of motion and where the body can normally go in terms of a movement. It can, you know, affect how low you squat, or how well your hips move back in a deadlift, or if you're doing, you know, a push-up and there's tightness in your upper back, it can really affect that range of motion. And particularly for strength training, how we operate within a set range of motion is really important. If you're a runner, it could affect your stride or your gait when you're running. And so if there's that tightness there, it really affects how well you're landing, how well you're able to take off, but also the length of stride too. So there's a lot of different ways where tightness over time can manifest and have those kinds of effects on range of motion and the ability to move within that set range of motion that everyone has on, you know, in their bodies. So foam rolling is a way to help improve that. And so there are studies out there, particularly I always recommend the American Council on Exercise. They've got a lot of really great research and studies that they've done internally, but also that they've cited to show the benefits of foam rolling. But the one key tenet in all of their findings is that it's a partner to an active stretching routine. So it's really important to make that time for stretching, as well as the workout itself. So that's something I've often said in a class that I'm teaching, or, you know, when I'm training a client, is the cool down is just as important, sometimes even more so than the workout itself, because it sets us up for a really good next session. So we take that time, because that's what we do when we work out, especially when we're strength training. We break down the muscles, and then we have to build them back up again through recovery to get them stronger. And the muscles shorten when we work out. So a stretch and a good recovery program really helps to bring that length back, opening up the body as well. And then combined with the activities of everyday life, also another really important reason to have active stretching and mobility into our routines. So especially nowadays where we're at home a lot more and we're sat down at a computer or a laptop or our phones or tablets, and we're kind of in that hunched over position, or we're sat down a lot more, all of that gets shortened. All of those fascial lines, you know, they get shortened a little, you know, when we're sat down or when we're in a forward posture like that. So again, really just reinforcing how important stretching is, and how important that whole mobility and recovery sequence is when it comes to our fitness regimen, or just daily activity. Even if it's a rest day where you're not going to do a full training session, even just throwing in a little bit of recovery, focused work or mobility work, always really important. So I'll pause here. I know I talked for a little bit about it. If you have any questions, if that's all making sense, you can type in the chat box. I know Zoom has like the little reaction things, or the emoji things that they've got on there too. So awesome, thumbs up, perfect. Awesome. And yeah, feel free to type in any questions, come off mute to go through those questions as well. So that's a little bit about what foam rolling is, why it's beneficial, and why it's good to pair it with active and with an active stretching program. So like dynamic stretching, mobility drills. There's a couple of pre-recorded webinars already on the GW Campus Rec YouTube channel. So I recommend also checking those out. I know Brian has done a webinar on mobility drills. And so kind of combining that with a little bit of foam rolling too can be really, really effective as well. So now that I've talked a whole bunch, let's do a little bit of foam rolling. So a couple of different types of foam rollers and equipment. So I kind of was showing these earlier. There are the cylindrical foam rollers. So like this one, this is a shorter one. There are also much longer ones that you might see in the gym. And this one has a lot of grooves and patterns on it. So you'll get a different effect as you're rolling on the, when you're rolling out. This one is very portable, which is why I like it. And the reason I got this one was because of when I go to trainings and stuff for, well, when we were in the gym, when I would go to trainings for teaching, this is a really portable option that I could take with me, or even if I was traveling or something and wanted to foam roll and just get a little bit of a release, I could do that too. And so it's a really nice portable option, because sometimes this can be hard to fit into a bag or a suitcase. So, and then even more portable is You can even use a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball. Same idea. And this is really great for feet. And I'll show you that in just a second, because particularly for runners, you know, you can, over time, you can build up tightness around your ankles. And sometimes that manifests itself with plantar fasciitis. It's a common thing that people will experience when there's a lot of that tightness around the feet, around the ankles. And when it manifests into other types of training, it can, you know, affect your range of motion when you squat, your ankle mobility, and it's also just, it can feel really uncomfortable. So something like this can really help start to break up some of that tightness. And it's also good for more targeted foam rolling called Trigger Point. That's the company itself that makes this one happens to be Trigger Point, the name Trigger Point, but it's another way that you can kind of do a little bit more focused myofascial release. So I kind of will start with these two first when I do a foam rolling series, or, you know, few different stretches, because this kind of gives me a general sense of what's going on and how things are doing. So whether it's my quads or my hamstrings or things like that, this kind of gives me a more general sense, since I'm covering a larger area as I'm rolling. And then once I kind of figure out and kind of I can sense where a knot is or where that extra tightness is, then I will use this. Is also really good around the shoulders, kind of around the scapula, which is your shoulder blades. So another good place to use a trigger point. But it doesn't have to be something like this. It can be a lacrosse ball, it can be a tennis ball, and you'll get the same kind of effect. But something like this is good for more targeted areas. So these are the kinds of things that are available and out there. You can have foam rollers that don't have all of these grooves and patterns like mine does. Some of the ones that you might see in a gym are those longer ones that are smoother. Again, a good one to kind of just get a sense of what's going on with your muscles, what might be tight and things like that. So there's these I found on Amazon. There's, like I said, this company called Trigger Point that specifically does, you know, myofascial release equipment. They have like a whole series and lineup of stuff. But they're, you know, ones like these can be really portable and good to have at home as well. So, but yeah, let's do some techniques. So, any questions about the types of equipment? All good? Awesome, cool, perfect. So I'm just gonna move my chair back here for a second and adjust the angle of my laptop here, so that way. And if you want to try any of these as well, you can. So let me just adjust this a little bit. There we go. So you want to give yourself some space when you foam roll. And like I said, you can do these in the beginning of a session with the dynamic warm up as you're getting warm, or as a way to kind of close out a session as well. But typically you will see it more done in the beginning of the session, combined with a dynamic warm up. So it's always paired with something. So you were mentioning hips and glutes earlier. Really common spot to foam roll because of the hips are your hub and they connect to everything. And so when there's tension there, it can manifest in other places too. So glutes, very popular one, and you kind of just gently sit on the foam roller and you can kind of roll a few inches forward, few inches back, and it's starting small, about maybe 2 to 4 inches of movement. So really kind of small, just to get a sense of what's going on. This is really good for the glute max. But there's also another muscle That's about an inch away from the lower back, kind of an inch over and down, and it's called the piriformis. And what it does is it helps your hips rotate externally. So it allows the knees to and the hips to rotate outwards. So it's an important hip mover, I'll say that. But when it gets tight, it can get stubborn because it's a smaller muscle. It's like a thin, flat muscle that also kind of overlaps with the sciatic nerve. So where it is and when it gets tight can kind of cause that discomfort a little bit at times. So yeah, it's kind of like about an inch down and over from the sacrum, the lower part of the back. And so getting into like for a stretch, you could do like a seated figure 4, but then as you roll, it's nice and gentle over that fleshy part of the glute. So that's one way to do the glutes. And then IT band, or side of the leg, is usually how I'll describe it for clients. Is, let me move this back a little bit. There we go. Come onto the side and gently, couple inches forward, couple inches back. Ooh, I can definitely feel this. So that's one way to do iliotibial band, side of the leg. And then for the quad itself, you would come into a more prone position, and same idea, nice and gentle. Hamstrings, come back over. And again, it's like very small range of motion. Going forward and back a little bit. I'll show the other side also because my hamstrings need it. So little forwards, little back, just like this. And then particularly for runners, for calves, same idea. And sometimes you can go a little bit leaning. There's a head of the muscle here that connects to a tendon called the perineal tendon. So, but start at the head of the muscle and then work your way down. So that's another way when you're doing your foam rolling, just like that. And then, like I said, this is another way I would do it. If I had this stick, I would kind of gently roll up and down, along the sides. This is a really good one for the legs. And then when it comes to rolling out your feet, you can start near the heel. Whoop. Make sure it stays under my foot. And then slowly just work your way forward. And it feels really good. Even if, you know, it's, if you're doing like, you know, daily walks, socially distant walks and things like that right now, this is another good one to do, just to keep the feet feeling good, to help prevent, you know, plantar fasciitis, because it can feel really uncomfortable, plantar fasciitis, just because of all that tightness. So even just doing a little bit, C circles, just to help break up any of that tightness that might be there. So that is a handful of techniques you can use for your legs, hips, and glutes. And again, combining them with that dynamic stretching. For the upper body, there can be tightness that lingers, particularly around the shoulders, under the scapula, into some of the lower traps. The back is something to be careful when you foam roll, because you don't want to foam roll your low back, don't want to do that. But what you can do is a little bit in the upper and mid back. So around, you can lie on your foam roller, so I've got it under me, and I just kind of will do a little forwards and a little back, just a little. Another way to kind of allow the chest to open up without really rolling on it at all. As you lie down, you have it centered, and you lie down, and then it's better with a longer foam roller, but you can open up chest. So I recommend if your foam roller is longer to do that one, but if it's shorter, I would hold off on that, and you can just gently roll. Triceps, another area that can get tight as well, especially from the leaning forward. You can use the foam roller to get that little stretch right here. Another way to do it. But this one is what really becomes handy. You can stand against the wall and find that point. There's a few points into the upper back and shoulders around the post delt and things like that, where you can stand against the wall and start to just kind of trigger point that a little bit. And it can help break up that tightness a little bit that manifests around the shoulders and into the lower traps, because they help support posture. They're doing a lot of work all day long. And so when we tip forward, kind of a side note with posture, those muscles have to work extra hard to try and keep us as upright as we can. So they're kind of always on. And so that's where that tightness can kind of manifest itself, is that it's always kind of working. And so being mindful of posture, but also giving the muscles a chance to kind of break up that tightness can help there too. So, and sometimes if there's tightness in the front of the shoulder, I'll take the ball and just gently kind of do little circles. That's all I'm doing here, just making a little circle on each side. Sometimes the pec minor, which is right here, that can be tight and cause that pulling of the shoulder a little bit, and just a good little release around the shoulders. So that's another way to help break up some of that tightness. So I'll pause here for a second. Any questions, anything I can demo again? Are those some exercises that you've done before or were familiar with already? All good? Awesome, great, yeah, I'm glad it's helpful. Do you need any of the exercises demoed again? And these ones you can do, like I said, just a few inches of movement and kind of using the bigger tools to get a sense of how, just get a lay of the land and how the muscles feel. And then this is where I find the ball to be really helpful, is to kind of get that more targeted approach to foam rolling. And so I kind of go along muscle more than that tendon itself. So I'll step back a little bit here and show again. So I'll kind of use the quads more so than trying to roll against the band and against the hip to loosen up around there. And so I'll kind of position myself so that I'm more rolling onto the muscle than on the actual IT band itself. So that's more of a tendon. So that's where I'll kind of go for, is like right along here with the muscle. And then helping to stretch out piriformis. Yeah, you're welcome. Helping to stretch out piriformis and glute medius. That's another one, is that can help mobilize around the hips and reduce some of that tightness. So in figure 4, you can come into seated and then cross your leg over. And you don't have to worry about kind of going like super far forward with the knee. It's more of just a way to help find that stretch and get into the piriformis, into the glute med. You can do these lying down, standing up. I like to do them seated. And I just kind of ease into the stretch and ease out. And just kind of do little subtle movement, not too big. And then on the other side, I'll keep my foot relaxed as well. And the reason is you want to keep any pressure off the knee. And so that's where having, you know, sometimes you'll see people really flex their foot, you know, and to keep the focus into the glute rather than try and, you know, point your toe or anything like that. So just kind of keeping it relaxed to relax the knee. You can come forward a little bit, ease out, forward, and ease out. So that's another good stretch to pair with the foam roll. Because some of the origin of the IT band lies within the glute med. And so that's the glute medius. So it's right along the side of the hip. And again, it's another muscle that helps with rotation of the hip, but also with what's called abduction. So when you move your leg out to the side, like this, that's abduction. And so that's where wanting to help, you know, wanting to do that stretch with the foam roll helps. So a lot of functional, because the hips are designed to do lots of different movement patterns. And so they're a key source of mobility in the body. And when we do good stretching, just allowing the hips to open up, it keeps the hips healthy. We feel good when we walk, when we run, and when we do all of our different movements in like squats or lunges or even deadlifts. They're all tied to having healthy hips. So yeah. Any other questions? Grab my chair. There we go. So yeah, the foam roller is a helpful tool, and it's a portable one. And so it's, like I said, really good to pair it with stretching. I know I've said that quite a bit, but it's kind of, it's not a replacement. It's more of a tool that is, accessory is not the word I want to use, but it's an auxiliary tool. It's helping out. And so that's where it's really valuable. And yeah, just kind of sprinkling it in over the course of the week can be really helpful. And it's one of those things like stretching, like mobility practice, being proactive about it is really, really impactful. So taking that time for stretching, for recovery and stretching and myofascial release is being proactive with it helps, because over time, if that tightness starts to build up, it can take sometimes longer to undo that tightness. So being proactive about it and integrating it into a routine. You know, you can do a little foam rolling while you're watching your Netflix or something, or your Amazon Prime show, or whatever you're watching. And so sometimes I'll do that too, where I just kind of will set up a show or put on some music and just do a little foam roll or a little stretch series. And even doing that small amount reaps dividends in the long run when it comes to mobility and just feeling good every day. I'm a big believer in functional training and feeling good in those activities of daily life. And these are great tools that help us do that too. So yeah, any other questions? If you have any other questions or follow-up, I'll leave my Instagram handle in the chat here so you're able to follow up with any other questions. Another way that you can do, I just remembered, where'd it go? There it is. You can use the ball if you don't have full access to a wall that's like empty and you have enough space to be able to do a shoulder release. What you can do is, move this again, you can use the floor as well. Being able to kind of lie down and just find where a knot might be. And you can kind of find around the shoulder blades area where I will get tight sometimes. And I'm able to kind of find that spot on the floor and things like that. So it's an alternative if you don't have that readily accessible wall that is open and doesn't have anything on it or anything like that. So the wall is more preferable because it's more upright when you're doing those kinds of myofascial release. But if you need to, and you sometimes can use the floor as a backup too. So like if you have a mat, or like I have carpeting, so it's a little softer. So, but the wall is the more optimal option for that. So that was one more thing I wanted to demo. But yeah, so that was everything that I wanted to cover today. And yeah, if you don't have any other questions or things come up, I'll leave my Instagram handle here in the chat. Let me type it in. And this will be, this replay of the webinar will be available, like I said, on the GW Campus Rec YouTube channel. So you're able to revisit it in an on-demand setting, and that's where lots of other webinars that we have are available as well. So thanks so much for coming. Again, if you have any questions or feedback on today's webinar, let me know. Happy to, get that feedback. There is a webinar tomorrow on goal setting and basically how you can apply goal setting into fitness and wellness. And tomorrow's webinar is at 5:30 and will also be recorded. And then we have a couple more topics coming up for webinars, including like sleep hygiene is one that's coming up. I'm doing one on body pump technique in about 2 weeks time. So a couple of exciting topics coming down the pike for some webinars, and then stay tuned for our fall schedule for group fitness and wellness and things like that too. So, but yeah, any other questions, thoughts, or feedback? You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Yeah, and again, the webinar will go up in a couple of days with the recording. And yeah, if you have any other questions, my Instagram handle is there as well. And yeah, just keep following also GW Campus Rec for the latest updates on all of our programming. Thanks for coming.